As the Lancasters kept no car, there was no garage. The four main living rooms of the family open from this hall on the first floor, while a narrower hall runs the length of the floor, one end opening by a door onto the lawn toward our house, and the other connecting by a door with the service wing. The staircase rises, not from the main hall but from this transverse one. Under this staircase is the lavatory of which Jim had spoken. Thus, entering by the porch and the front door, there is the wide hall from front to back, bisected by the narrower transverse one. The parlor, a word we still use, lies on the right, while Mr. Lancaster's library is on the left. Then comes the transverse hall, with the staircase going up on the left, and an extension, rather narrower, leading to the side entrance to the right. Behind this is the morning room, done in chintz, where Margaret keeps her accounts and writes her letters, and across the main hall the dining room, the latter to the left and connecting through the pantry and underneath the back staircase with the kitchen beyond. A servant's dining room and closets to the front of the house, the kitchen, pantry, kitchen porch and laundry comprise the service wing and connect through a door with the body of the house, while a rear staircase, rather awkwardly placed to open onto the kitchen porch, and thus separating the pantry from the kitchen, leads to what we call the guest wing on the second floor, and then continues to the servants' bedrooms on the third. This rear staircase, playing a certain strategic part in our first crime, opens on the second floor not far beyond the first landing of the main staircase, for the second floor wing is on a lower level than the body of the house. One who ascends the front stairs may thus look through an archway along the guest wing passage, and then turn and go on up the short flight of 6 steps to the hall and 4 large bedrooms which are, or were, occupied by the family. All these rooms and passages are large, with high corniced ceilings, and the effect is one of great dignity and space. Practically the same arrangement holds upstairs, that is, the 4 main sleeping rooms open on the broad hall, while the guest wing, with its lower ceilings, contains 2 guest rooms to the front, almost never used, with a connecting bath between them, and to the rear a sewing room, a linen closet, a housemaid's closet, and reached by a narrow hallway, the entrance to the back staircase. The servants sleep on the third floor. Of the 4 main sleeping rooms, Mrs. Lancaster occupied the large corner one in the front of the house, this being somewhat noisier and more exposed to the sun than the others, but being by all tradition of the Crescent the room belonging to the mistress of the house. Through a bathroom it connected with her husband's room behind, this space with certain closets corresponding to the side hall below. Emily's room lay directly across the hall from it, also a front room. She occupied it because with both doors open she could hear her mother if, or when, she needed her at night. Behind this room, with the upper part of the staircase well between them, lay Margaret's room, which was over the dining room and at the rear of the house. There was no staircase to the top floor in the main part of the house, the only access to it being by the one in the guest wing. What puzzled the police from the start was not the layout of the house, but the seeming impossibility of any access to it. Always carefully locked, with the hoarding by Mrs. Lancaster extra precautions had been taken. Extra locks and in some cases bolts also had been placed on all outside doors, and the screen doors and windows were provided with locks. During Mr. Lancaster's afternoon walks the screen on the front door was left unlatched so he could admit himself with his key to the main door, but the inside wooden door was carefully locked. All these doors were found fastened when they arrived, with the single exception of the side door which Emily herself had opened when she ran outside. These included the front and back hall doors, the side entrance, the one on the kitchen porch and another from the laundry into a drying yard. The door to the basement was padlocked, and had remained so since the furnace had been discontinued in the spring. When the police arrived that afternoon, therefore, certain things became obvious, outside of the bedroom itself. One was that while there were innumerable doors and windows giving access to the house, none of them had apparently been used. Another was that the kitchen porch, the most vulnerable spot since the women servants were constantly using it, had been occupied ever since the luncheon hour, Ellen resting and later bearing up a cake, and Jenny the waitress polishing her silver at the table there. With the family shut in the library and the servants huddled in their own dining room, the detective named Sullivan had at once made an intensive survey of the lower floor, including doors and windows. He found nothing, and at last went back to the death chamber itself. "House is like a fortress," he reported. "One thing's sure, nobody got in or out of it unless someone inside here helped him to do it." But he found the inspector at a front window, gazing curiously at the porch roof outside. "Looks like he got in here," he said. "Something's overturned that flower pot. And look at this screen." Sullivan looked and grunted. Margaret Lancaster always kept a row of flower pots on her mother's windowsill. Now one of them had slid off and overturned on the porch roof, and the screen itself was raised about 4 inches. "Might ask one of the daughters if this screen was like this earlier in the day," the inspector said. Sullivan went down to the library, and came back to say that the screen had not been opened, and that Mrs. Lancaster had had a horror of houseflies, that she would have noticed it at once. The medical examiner had finished at the bed by that time, and the fingerprint men were at work, and not finding anything, at that. The medical examiner went to the window and, still wearing his rubber gloves, tried to raise the screen from the top. But it would not move an inch and he gave it up. "Nobody got out there," he said. "Might have tried it, however, and then gave it up." They tried the other screen onto the porch roof, but it too stuck tight in its frame. It was not until Sullivan had crawled out the front hall window that they reached the roof at all, and that window he had found closed and locked. The 3 men were puzzled. Then Sullivan stooped suddenly and pointed to a small smear on the wooden base of the first screen. "Looks like blood here," he said. He straightened up and looked about him, then he creaked his way across the tin roof. There, lying wilted but fairly fresh in the hot sun, he picked up 2 or 3 bits of newly cut grass. Just such grass indeed as I had watched cascading from the blades of Eben's lawn mower. "What's that?" said the inspector. "Grass. How'd it get here? There's no wind. Birds, maybe." None of them were satisfied, however. They went across into Emily's room, where her bird was still singing in the sunlight by a front window, and tried her screens.